We back! Oh, like REM, after a weekend in which, Manchester United found new ways to torture their fan base with a performance even worse than Mark Zuckerberg's unfathomable decision to mark his wife's 40th birthday by dressing up as Benson Boone. Way to make it all about you, Marky Mark. Plymouth Argyle shocked Manchester City for 8 delicious, meaningful minutes. Their fans will hopefully remember forever. Bournemouth outlasted Wolves on penalties. I've got to say, God bless the War Cherries. Watching them gives me the same excitement I experienced when I heard the creators of Peppa Pig announce Mummy Pig is going to have a third piglet. Deep cut, and Arsenal, Tottenham and Everton didn't sully their fans' weekends because we didn't even play. It's top 10 greatest weekend ever. And with his Liverpool now 13 points clear at the top of the table, he ain't gloating. To break down all of it, it's that magical brain in the bottle, the pride of Yorkshire from The Athletic. It's my friend, Mr. Rory Smith.
It's been a good weekend not worrying about your football team playing, Rog. It's always a pleasure when your football team doesn't play.
I feel younger. I sit straighter.
Stress-free.
Climbing mountains and yodeling off the top of them. That is how glorious it has all felt, Will. But this is not about me. Let's touch upon it. Let's get it out the way. Let's rip off the bloody footballing band-aid. Liverpool Football Club didn't play this weekend. Out the FA Cup, thanks to that Samuel Darley. Dragon Slayer of football, Plymouth Argyle. But last week, midweek, they defanged their latest challenger, Newcastle. I was told they were good. I was told they were going to give him a good game in the Carabao Cup final in, 13 days' time? Well, Liverpool won 2-0, almost at a stroll, 13-point lead in February, 10 games to go. If you win 7, no one can touch your roar. Do we both agree now? 10 weeks of coronation now await. We can call it.
Well, not necessarily. There's a lot of quite worrying noises coming out of various political entities about World War III at the moment, and given that the last time Liverpool won the league, it seemed to cause a global pandemic. You wouldn't rule it out. Do you know what I mean? Things happen, Rog.
Is that where we are now? Like, we've gone through a journey together where you feel like, it's early days. Yeah, there was the gauntlet of games that I'm old enough to remember, that brutal gauntlet of games that were meant to do Liverpool in. But Slot just skipped through all of them in his calm way. There was but the transfers are going to do him in. The Trents, the signals, the celebrations, that's going to do him in. There's just one thing. Is this where we are now? You are refusing to call the title because Liverpool are 13 points clear and World War III is clearly imminent.
I'm just saying, I get the sense that maybe between them, Trump and Putin don't want Liverpool winning the league. That's my vibe.
That's all it is at the end of the day.
That's just the impression I get. Elon Musk, I think, is actively discouraging
Millwall.
Liverpool.
Proper Millwall.
I don't know if he's proper anything, but I'm guessing he doesn't understand why Ryan Gravenberch is so good. Short of World War III, Rog, I think it is overwhelmingly likely now that Liverpool do win the league. But the one thing I would say, and this is there's a little bit of kind of biased fan in here as well, you just never know. With injuries, as the schedule gets really busy, it doesn't take much for it to feel a little bit more dramatic than it is at the moment. It does look a bit like it might be a procession now. If Liverpool were to draw with Everton at the start of April, maybe lose at Fulham, it might look like there's a bit more life left in it yet. They should get over the line from here.
By the way, World War III, this thing has escalated. It was that gauntlet of hard games. It was the Trent want away. It was Mo Salah's those are the things that were meant to stop you. I believe, please God, we'll get to the other side of World War III, which is clearly happening. And still, Slot's going to have you 14, 15 points clear the other side of it.
I think there's an argument that if World War III does start, we should maybe put Slot in charge of NATO.
My God, I'm so out of my pay grade geopolitically. All I can say to that is, Liverpool win the title, World War III breaks out, always in asterisks with your mob, bro. Always.
That's the worry. I don't need another delayed season that has to be played out in a post-nuclear wasteland.
Yeah, this is, by the way, post-nuclear wasteland and a title. This is where we are. Hard-hitting question. Would you take it?
Depressingly, yes.
Yeah, I know. Bite your arm off. Gonna tell you, the Everton part of me is like, nuclear wasteland title, did you say? It's an argument.
There's a conversation to be had.
There is a conversation to be had. It's a conversation about so bloody much. Really, has there been a more chipper conversation about World War III and nuclear escalation? I don't like the meme that escalated quickly. But my God, if there was ever a use for it, this conversation did. We do need to de-escalate. We need to say the relegation battle also seems over. I think there's a little soupçon of intrigue, possibly in that Manchester City 115 charge judgment, which we're told is imminent any day. Thank God for the race for Europe. I think there's like 9 teams going for the almost certain 2 4th and 5th Champions League places. Really a Royal Rumble, quite intriguing between underachievers and overachievers. But the FA Cup returning this week has suddenly become, I believe, all the more riveting. Let's do this 5th round thing. Let's start with a toast. I want to raise my third first Michelob Ultra of the day. It is award season. The Oscars last night, Timothée Chalamet was robbed. Deserved. I'll make this case. I'll die on this hill. I think he deserved the best actor male thingy Oscar just for his commitment to the bit. And I hope history always remembers Chalamet's Oscar campaign as one that ranked in the top 10 greatest moments of American soccer history. Really, it was FC Chalamet waxing rhapsodic with Nardwuar about his love of Saint Etienne, wearing a Columbus Crew hoodie. One of his pressers leaving a screening in Italy early to go and watch Roma, then taking a selfie with Dybala, leaking photos of playing against Joe Gomez, which he did as a kid. This was all brilliantly done, insanely well researched, really playing the role of America's first celebrity football hipster, if you will. It was honestly really beautiful. And talking about awards and beauty, Raw, I've got to say congratulations to Cole Palmer. Last week took home the first of many, and by many, I mean possibly just one, trophy of the season. When he was voted, I'm sure you all saw this, dear listeners, Cole Palmer was voted United Kingdom's sexiest footballer, narrowly beating out Jude Bellingham and Jack Grealish in the top 3. Rory, I think of you as a data man, just hard numbers. Can you tell us, how do they work out the metric for this sexiness?
Well, I presume it's kind of a sample study of however many thousand people, heart rates quickened, trouser movements, that sort of thing. I suppose you're looking at expected trouser movements. I think is where it is. I've got to say, strongly disagree with the findings of that survey. Jude Bellingham is clearly a lot sexier than Cole Palmer.
Jude Bellingham is much. I've just suddenly realised, as you talked about expected trouser movement, that I just realised is exactly why Pep Guardiola wears those cargo pant pockets in very, very avant-garde places.
It might well be, Rog. It's, clever pocket placement is a great way to disguise XTM. On Chalamet, this is a Chalamet household. We're big fans of the whole Wonka universe. My son loved the Wonka film in which Timothée Chalamet took on the Gene Wilder role. And I was touched as well to discover, what an actual football fan Timothée Chalamet is. It's not a pose. It's not a posture. He's not doing it to be liked. He just really loves football. As you say, he is like a grade A Hollywood football hipster. But I feel he would have won that Oscar if he'd agreed to be interviewed by me. I put a request in and his publicist very kindly, very politely said no. Could that have swung the balance, Rog? I feel it probably could. So, a little bit of a lesson there for Timothée Chalamet and all the other people going for various Oscar awards. Come on the show, Chalamet. Don't be a coward. We would love to talk Baftemi Gomi with you and your, really your ball knowing. On the sexiness front, I do believe beautiful, beautiful Beto robbed again. By the way, I was watching the Oscars last night, briefly, fleetingly, mostly watched for Conan. I was shocked, and I'm sure many of you listening were, when Adrian Brody got the Best Actor gong, or whatever the hell they are called, and beat out Anthony Gordon. Anthony Gordon's protestation of innocence in Man with Strange Haircut shoves Dutchman in face, which is one of my favourite performances of the season. The protestation of innocence, the look of bafflement, really was the kind of method work that Brody, I think, would approve of. Anthony Gordon, who, also you may know him from such movies as diving in agony without being touched by multiple defenders. Just an incredible
body of work. Also, leaning into a microphone with Rog in the Everton show that we did live in Washington, D.C. I was just remembering this, where he came on. The Everton fans in the sold-out Washington Theatre started to sing the Anthony Gordon chant, and he let into the microphone, and he goes, "I'll never leave you!" And he was sold to Newcastle 3 weeks later. God bless him. I'll never leave. Whenever I see him, I always think about that. I'll never leave yous. But let's get to the football, Raw. First, let me proudly announce that our newsletter, The Raven, has now gone twice a week. What? Yes, for the longest time we have told you all you need to know for your viewing pleasure of the weekend to come every Friday. I actually write that beauty, every single word. Now, we break down the best bits that we did see every Monday. But the thing I love most about the newsletter is I think the way it connects all of us, your ideas, your thoughts, your creativity sent to us via email at meninblazers@gmail.com. So if you're not subscribed, do so now. Go to our website, subscribe to The Raven, the official email newsletter of our community. Again, you can subscribe via our website. I actually wrote last Friday about my feelings about the passing of the late, great Gene Hackman, the fabulous Royal Tenenbaum, who passed away last week. We had a quote that I can't stop thinking about in Friday's newsletter. Gene Hackman told, I think, the LA Times in 2003, they asked him for the meaning of life, and he said, "Life's too short to take seriously. Just do your best, be kind, and try not to screw up too much." That, to me, is the spirit of the FA Cup, or at least the spirit we'll try and bring to this show in his honour. Raw, let's get to the football. Start by going to that pit of sadness, Old Trafford. For yesterday's Manchester United won, Fulham won, 4-3 on penalties. United, the FA Cup defending champions and self-sabotaging masochists, currently suffering almost death by 1,000 blows as the mass club firings, the soup and sandwich drama, Garnacho strops, Dorgu red cards, piles of injury, and the FA Cup was theirs to defend. But let's be honest, the FA Cup winning it was not a fig leaf for Ten Hag to hide behind. And as I say, progressing this season via like Harry Maguire offside goals in the last round, was more, it all felt like more prolonging the agony for Reuben Amorim rather than being a mark of success. So going into this one, history on their side. I think they have beaten Fulham 9 times in the FA Cup, had not lost, as a commentator kept telling us, since 1908. Amorim said this before the game, Raw. He said, all of the challenges have made him, at Manchester United, quote, a more complete manager, because sometimes you need to lose and be in a poor situation to grow, which was, to me, Raw, the oddest version of that footballing cliche that you need to take yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I see what he's driving at. There is a kind of linked in philosophy there, isn't there? You've got to kind of overcome difficulty to improve. But I'm not sure that anyone outside Old Trafford would think that Reuben Amorim is a better manager because of what's happened at Manchester United over the last 4 or 5 months.
Sometimes it's great to be kicked in the down below. Pain's good for you.
It just really builds you up. It means that you can cope more with being kicked in the down belows. I don't know. You're right. The FA Cup wasn't the skin gets thicker. The FA Cup wasn't a fig leaf for Ten Hag, and there is something about how the FA Cup has become kind of the summit of Manchester United's ambitions in recent years.
Yeah, sometimes even your successes are used as a rod, whether it's to beat you. This team gutted by injuries. I think 7 substitutes only that they named, 3 of whom were teenagers. And the game was honestly hard to watch. It was filled with lethargy and fear, negativity, slop from both sides, more than anything that approached kind of optimism and wanting it. United did open brightly. That burnt off, kind of like the morning pollution in Los Angeles. And the game just settled into a pattern of lacklustre nothingness. Poor Højlund, I do ache for him. Missed from close range, no goals in 18 agonising games for that human trauma. Clash was a snooze until the 45th minute +1. The Fulham fans trying to keep themselves awake by singing, "He looks like a rat, he looks like a rat. Bruno Fernandes, he looks like a rat," and off the corner that ensued, Pereira looped one deep, Muniz nodded down, and Calvin Bassey created separation from Mazraoui and then managed to snap his neck emphatically past the flailing Onana. United, this is incredible, Raw. This statistic, Manchester United, had not been ahead at half-time in any of their last 21 games. That is mind-bending. And if you think about who is choosing the first 11 that leads to that, it's pretty damning.
Yeah, it's not great to always be behind or I suppose level at half time. I suppose maybe do we think they're leaning into the kind of the old United comeback, irresistible force, harness Old Trafford vibe, that maybe that's the last thing they've got to go on? But it's just another statistic, isn't it? Another measure of how far this club has fallen, of how little impact Amorim seems to have had. And I think we're both quite pro Amorim, aren't we? Like, we're both pro Amorim and the causes of Amorim, but it's really hard to see any. By this stage, 4 months in, you would think you'd be starting to see improvements, little glimmers of light, but everything at United is still shadow. And the other thing I would say just quickly, Rog, the Fulham fans were singing that, but you've forgotten it's Fulham. So they're not singing it in a mock Cockney voice, are they?
Oh, it's more the Hugh Grant kind of
He looks like a rat. He looks like a rat. Bruno Fernandes, he looks like a rat.
I heard about a rat once, apparently. Vermin.
Like the sort of thing that Butler catches, yes.
I've been put in my place. I do remember taking my youngest kid to his first ever football game. I'm used to going to Everton, and we were having to be in London, so I took him to Fulham. I'd revved him up that we were, you've got to keep your head down, no American accents, it's going to be a lot of violence. And we turned up at Fulham, and it was genuinely, I was the hardest person at Fulham. It was full of, everyone looked like they were in tweed jackets. They all looked like substitute geography teachers, and it was utterly magnificent, which the second half was not. Watching the Manchester United players toil almost with the psychic pressure of it all, the losing, the free fall, the muck, the soup, the sandwiches, really the existential fear. The fans, God bless the United fans, kept trying to lift them with song, but then couldn't help themselves whenever the ball was given away from just expressing their discontent, their frustration, their disbelief of every misplaced pass. Team laboured. Garnacho was taken off the naughty step and flung on. For me, I've got to say, to watch players like Christian Eriksen, such a hero, just become just a floundering cameo role in the Old Trafford Mire's hard to watch. Bruno, it should be said, barely featured. You barely heard his name. And then amidst the truly flatulent football, Dalot whipped in a ball from the byline back deep, and it was Bruno, first time, span around. What quality he has in moments. He loves an FA Cup tie. I think his 8th goal in his last 12 FA Cup games. His body physics in this one, Nobel Prize winning, just kind of whipped right body shape, low and true like Spandau Ballet, through the legs of Berger, I think it was, and lasering it into the net. It felt less relief, more just I don't even, how would you describe the mood in that moment?
An element of kind of, so they get to beat us in extra time, do they? Interesting.
Yeah. No one wanted more. No one. I mean, The rest of the game was so devoid of quality. Hardly any competitive spirit, which was really odd, because the game was totally there for the taking. Chido Obi-Martin, 17-year-old United striker, he came on. He seemed to be the only player that wanted it, couldn't find the dagger, put himself in dangerous places. By the way, Roy, I mentioned Fulham last beat United in the FA Cup in 1908. Do you imagine Willian was running around shouting at Iwobi, "Let's do it for the boys of 1908"?
I think there's half a chance Willian played in that game, isn't there? How long has he been around?
Made his debut. He was a young...
No, not even his debut. William was an experienced campaigner in 1908.
He was already early 30s. God bless Roy Hodgson, actually. I think that was his 5th spell as manager at Fulham in 1908. And it was a fantastic day for a lot of Fulham fans. Willian, Hodgson, Tim Ream also playing. But when it went into extra time, I wrote in my game notes, no one wants or needs 30 more minutes of this crap. There's a concept of adding to the storehouse of knowledge. There was nothing in this game that will ever be remembered or recalled. A game bereft of ideas, quality and skill. Fulham fans will remember the penalties. The penalties were honestly all masterclass until United's fourth. Paul Lindelof kind of trudged up to the spot. I think Eo if you've seen Winnie the Pooh cartoons, had more confidence. I mean, we were well beyond, for United, the realm of regular penalty takers, and he just hit one savable height, savable placement. Leno Superman'd it. Anthony Robinson let the record show, then finished smoothly. I'm sure Pochettino was watching, being like penalty 1 or 2 taker in 2026. A. Robinson, and then Xerxes. Poor tragic Doom Xerxes fluffed his lines. And Fulham won. Lovely scenes for their players, lovely scenes for their fans, who I think are savouring a season. Probably Fulham fans, is this your best season since the 2010 Europa League final campaign? You deserve that joy. Into the quarterfinals for the second time in 3 years. But my God, Raw United, another week, another finger in the eye. I think John Champion called it an annus horribilis, which you've got to be very careful saying on live TV. Really football showing equality, ideas, creativity, belief, collective anything, played out in front of a, at this point, quite traumatised, gutted Old Trafford crowd. It's Europa League or bust now for United season. Narrator whispers, it's bust. Raw, is this season going to be as bereft as the staff's lunch buffet options at Old Trafford?
Well, as you say, it's everything now rests on the Europa League, and there is a huge amount of pressure on that, I think, because not only does it mean a trophy, it also means access to the Champions League next season. And Manchester United, I think it is not controversial to say, will not be qualifying for the Champions League through the Premier League. If they win the Europa League, then there is a kind of world, amazingly, where they suddenly have access to potentially $150 million in prize money.
That's a lot of soup and sandwiches.
A lot of soup and sandwiches. You might even be able to get the M&S Taste the Difference range of soups there, to be honest, with $150 million. Maybe not for certain. Things are quite expensive in Britain at the moment.
Raw's living off a steady diet of Terry's chocolate orange,
it's all
not to get scurvy.
Factory outlet Terry's chocolate oranges. It's got all your food groups. No, I think the thing with United is that the winning the Europa League is a massive long shot. There are some good teams left in the Europa League, but there is now an argument, if you're Reuben Amorim, that you basically forego the Premier League. You put your reserves out in the Premier League. You play Aiden Heaven. You play some of the kids who are coming through. You use it as a place to experiment, and you put all of your eggs in that single Europa League basket. They've got Real Sociedad in the last 16, which is tough. Real Sociedad are better at football than Manchester United, but there is still a little bit of a kind of... There's a bit of awe, I think, that United still have in Europe, and Amorim needs to harness that, because the only way I think he saves his reign at United, the only way that United have any chance, really, of becoming a competitive force within English football in the next 2 or 3 years is by winning the Europa League. They kind of have to throw everything at that.
God bless. Real Sociedad 9th in the table, but honestly, on paper, considered favourites in this one. Is really, as you say, only the glorious kind of memory of what Old Trafford was that United may be able to wield in their favour. And United play Arsenal next Sunday. My God, the levels of trauma in that one. As you say, only Brene Brown could probably truly fathom them. Across town, back on Saturday, Manchester City 3. Oh, you heartless bastards. Plymouth Argyle 1. Oh, and City, after that Champions League humiliation at Real Madrid, the shambolic title defence, which has left them, I think, 20 points, is it, behind your league-leading Liverpool trademark. October's Carabao exit, which I still remember at Tottenham Hotspur. FA Cup. For Pep Guardiola, really, his Obi-Wan Kenobi, his only hope. Not since his first season at Manchester City, 2016-17, had our frantic friend failed to win a trophy as a manager. Into this, walked a team in the relegation zone in the Championship. 39 league places between these two teams, operating almost in different stratospheres. One team, Plymouth, owned by a Men in Blazers listener, I crap you not, from Buck County, Pennsylvania, the great Simon Howlett. We've told this story a couple of times. He's a Plymouth native, made a lot of money in finance, brought his childhood club to save them from bankruptcy and really obscurity. God bless you, Simon. Who wrote such a beautiful interview in our newsletter this week about what it means for this city, a city in the southwest of England, a dock, port city that he called is subject to the same economic woes as a northern city, but trapped in the south. The other, owned by a nation state. Plymouth's weekly wage bill, $226,000. Manchester City's a reported $5 million a week. That's the gulf between these two teams, which is to say, the shot levels when, after a resilient opening, 38th minute, Argyle only went and opened the scoring. Their Ukrainian defender, Maxim Tolovaryov, 6'5" wonder. If you've not seen him, close your eyes. Think of essentially Timu Erling Haaland with his blonde ponytail, sending the away fans into beautiful chaos. Fantastic header, sending the ball away from him from a corner. How sweet that moment must have felt for the 7,000 plus travelling fans who come all the way from the tip in that southwest of England. Raw, you'd seen this team do Brentford. Raw, you'd seen them do a week in Liverpool 11 in the previous round. I know in my head I heard Al Michael shout, "Do you believe in Plymouth miracles?" Did you let yourself believe for even a single moment in this one?
Yeah, you have to, because that's the cup. And as strange as it sounds, less likely things have happened in the FA Cup, and it does retain that capacity even now to survive, or at least to make you sort of willingly suspend your cynicism for a little bit. And certainly against Liverpool, Plymouth produced an incredible defensive performance to shut Liverpool and a weakened Liverpool down completely. There was a point where you thought, well, maybe they could do the same against Manchester City. Certainly get to a stage where Guardiola is forced to throw on some of the big guns, because Plymouth have shown they can shut their opponents down. Tolovaryov was central to it against Liverpool, and you kind of hoped that he might be able to do it again.
Simon Hallett, the Plymouth owner, wrote to me. He said it was a really, really beautiful 10 minutes. And Simon, it wasn't quite 10 minutes to be truthful. It was 8. But my God, to put those delicious 8 minutes into context, Argyle, I think, had been winning away in the league for just 10 minutes all season. So it was not nothing. We didn't know at the time, but that would be Plymouth's only shot on goal. Really, I'd say a wonderful but fleeting moment of misdirection. The fans got to sing "How Crap Must You Be?" We're winning away. These fans who would have travelled all that way from the tip of England to that mighty northern powerhouse city of football, which they probably couldn't believe in their dreams, and their joy lasted just until the stroke of half-time. Guardiola later complained about just how bad the ball was. He used a different brand of ball, I think Mitre, for the FA Cup, and his players had 20 shots they needed to calibrate. But once they'd mastered the flight and the velocity, it felt like it was over. Off a KDB free kick, artfully arced in, 19-year-old Nico O'Reilly flicked the ball in. There was relief. You could feel it, honestly, in Manchester all the way from New York City. Plymouth had the Pyrrhic victory of knowing that ultimately, as you say, they forced City into emptying the bench of the big guns to get the job done. Haaland came on in the second half. The Pilgrims goalkeeper, who I remember from the last round, I called Hazard. And you're like, no, it's not Hazard. He's English. It's Hazard. He had a number of more audacious saves that he kind of showed us in the Liverpool game. But the fight against relegation in the Championship, that is the real focus for this team. And the truth is, their manager started to pull off their own best players, even with the score tied. So what did we learn? We learned Nico O'Reilly really don't like drama or puppies or unicorns or nice things. 76th minute, he bullied all comers at the back post on the corner, put City ahead. 90th minute, Haaland charged through, fed KDB. And you could see when he finished, when he scored, Kevin De Bruyne. Watch this moment if you've not seen it. Just look how his teammates celebrate with him. The faces on them of joy and relief and meaning. And nothing goal, really, in the context of things. But it meant everything, clearly, to them. I don't like to read too much into things when I'm not in training, Raw. But you could almost see that narrative about his age, about the football leaving him, the extent to which it had been internalised.
Yeah, and there's no question this has been a difficult season for De Bruyne, principally through injury. I suspect we are all operating under the assumption that this is his last few months in a Manchester City shirt. It's his last few months in the Premier League. He has been an incredible generational player, and it had been threatening, I guess, to turn into a relatively sad swan song, really, because he hasn't looked like himself. He's still, even though he's been fit for a few months now, he still looks somehow limited. He's not quite as fluid, not quite as fluent as he once was. He's certainly, the creative spark is still there, but it's flickering, it's stuttering, it's not there constantly. And I think he will now take whatever moments he can to try and get the farewell that he deserves from English football, because he has been one of the two best players of the last 10 years in England, and it would be sad to see him go without some sort of proper kind of valedictory tour.
I hope we say the same about Beto in 10 years' time. City through to the quarterfinals for the 8th time in 9 seasons, 19th successive victory in FA Cup games against teams from lower divisions. I think the aggregate score in those games is something like 72 goals to 10. This, not an impressive performance, but they are now favourites in the bookmakers list for this FA Cup tchotchke. Not a lot by Pep standards. I'd say raw a slither of meaning can be found, a slither of solace, a twiggle of joy in a. And by the way, as an Everton fan, I would bite your arm off for an FA Cup. So when I say a twiggle of joy, it's just within context. This season of chaos, this season of confusion, this season almost of disappointing impotence. I mean, what do you think an FA Cup would mean? Not nothing.
But this is the thing, isn't it? Because this has been basically as bad a Manchester City season as you can think. They don't appear to have won a game since October. They've been in this sort of state of permanent crisis. They were humiliated in the Champions League, and yet they're still probably going to qualify for the Champions League again next season, and they could well win the FA Cup. That, like you say, to an awful lot of clubs, that is not a crisis at all. That is a dream season.
Generational. Oh my God!
It does kind of show you the level from which they are falling. That's a massive factor, and it also shows how quick we should maybe expect the rebuild to be, because Manchester City get things done fast.
God bless. We've got to touch upon Plymouth. 7,800 Green Army fans had that day of wonder. They've seen their team beat Brentford. I hope they carry those memories with them forever. The priority now to save the championship status. I think they're 3 points from safety, but they have a new energy and a new manager, Miron Muric, who is meant to be a remarkable human being. Talks a lot about courage, which is obviously a value we truly believe in on this show. Taking over really a corpse of a project from Wayne Rooney, breathe life into it. The team is transforming itself. The new manager, 2 of the 3 centre-backs, one of whom's captain, have just come in. I think the captain has started maybe 6 games for the club. Real green shoots of possibility growing almost like wildflowers in Chernobyl. And talking about Ukraine, that's a terrible pivot. I do want to give Talaverierov real love for the way he talked post-game, the Plymouth goal scorer. If you've not seen this post-game conversation, find it. I think it's on our Instagram. He talked about how he hasn't seen his own father for 3 years because of the war, but his dad still manages to find time to send him weekly information breakdowns on opposing strikers so that he can improve his game on the regs. To hear that was to feel the love of a father and a son, and also to ache. A small story that captures the big story. May football offer some solace and a sense of global connectivity at the time. I mean, that's what football does, right, in times of fear and pain.
Yeah, it's something that we turn to, I think, as a source of solace, as a distraction, as a way to kind of understand, as you say, like bigger things. It's often through football that you understand kind of the real scope of what's happening. I think in a way that maybe politics or whatever else it might be might not quite do. Football can reach those parts.
Yeah, Roy was just workshopping material for when Liverpool do clinch that title after the nuclear war. We're both podcasting with slightly singed eyebrows. Bournemouth won. God, that's dark. Wolves won. Bournemouth win on penalties. 5-4. Come on, you Golden War cherries. Game in which, honestly, Rod, the biggest challenge in this one, in the early exchanges, was the fact that the sun was out and shining. Which, if you watch
English stadiums are not built for these extreme conditions, Rog.
I know. The first ever letter we got at Men in Blazers, menandblazers@gmail.com, was, I think, someone watched a Manchester United game and they showed that shot of Sir Alex Ferguson then, who was manager, looking at the sun with his hands over his eyes, and there were like 1,000 fans behind him also putting their hands over their eyes, and someone wrote in and said, have sunglasses not been invented in England yet? Which was a great question, but it did seem in this one, the sun, I crap you not, tactically, strategically, it seemed to almost confuse the players. They were just like, what's that mysterious shiny orb up there in the sky?
Well, it would be. It's especially at the end of winter, it becomes very confusing when the sun comes out again. Like it does take you a while to notice you certainly don't adjust your behaviour for several weeks. Because often you think it's spring, but really it's just a trick, and then there's just a second winter coming.
Yeah.
It's an uncertain time of year for all of us, Rog. We're not used to it.
It is. What comes more often? You make it sound like up in Yorkshire, Halley's Comet comes more often than the sun.
Well, it's just it doesn't come at all for so long, and then suddenly it's there in the sky, and it's a bit frightening. I remember going into a cave in Yugoslavia on a school trip, and down in those salt mines, and fish had adapted. Because there was no light, they'd become utterly blind, and then ultimately they had no eyes. Yeah, I mean, it's not quite that bad, but yeah, you get the general gist.
It's not that bad yet, Raw.
Yeah, you wait until the nuclear fallout hits.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna. Yeah, didn't. You talked about the second winter. It's the third winter that I'm worried about, my friend. God, this is the darkest podcast ever.
This is what the FA Cup does to people, Roger.
I know it does. It does. And Wolves, it gets worse for you because Bournemouth took the lead with ease. Nice to see Evan Nielsen back after a month off with a fractured metatarsal. Picked up some slot, made it 1-0. Cherries had multiple goals. Varred off. Wolves just did not seem to be in it at all, which is exactly when, in moments like that, Acuna loves to just step up, grab the game by the throat out of nowhere. He took a touch, I think it was like 35 yards out, and just unleashed the kind of goal you honestly wonder why we don't see more of. A lashed arc span a ball into the top corner. Cunha, 15 goals on the season. We'll talk about him in a darker way in one moment, but Raw, this gentleman lives to unleash from outside the box. He's almost like the Kendall Roy of football, all bangers, all the time.
It's interesting because we've seen a general decline, I think, both in the number of goals scored from outside the box in recent years and shots taken, but also as a consequence, kind of players who can do it as a specialty. That used to be a thing. There would be certain players who you knew, if they were 25, 30 yards out, you knew they were thinking about it. You knew that was where they really came into their own. And I think there were periods where pretty much every team had someone like that. Not every great player could do it, but every team had someone who almost that was their job, that they were the threat from outside the box. And it's almost died out. Cunha is probably the only player I can think of in the Premier League at the moment who does it regularly, who scores from outside the box. There's other players who obviously are capable of it occasionally, but Cunha is the only one who I can think of doing it multiple times this season. This
game, honestly, was a knife fight. It felt saltier and saltier as the game went on. Totti cleared the ball off the line not once but twice. I think the XG was Bournemouth 4.13 to Wolves 0.9. 31 shots from the Cherries. Shout out to Sam Johnston in the Wolves goal. I think 7 saves. Truly fantastic. Wolves deserve credit for defending in such an organised fashion. They were stout, I think is the word. Clash became edgy grip or grapple. And God bless Cunha losing his mind at the end. One of the most prolonged red cards I've seen in a long time. He took forever to exit the field. Went, I think, punch, kick, headbutt on poor Kirkes. Whatever it was extreme MMA. Raw, this gentleman Cunha scores the banger, gets sent off for the Violencia. Could you say he lives on that fine line between genius and insanity, or am I projecting?
I think the problem for Cunha might be that the genius isn't genius enough, and the insanity, although it's not full-on insanity, is a bit too much. So it's the second time that we've seen Cunha really explode after a game. I think the first time was after Ipswich, wasn't it?
The security guard's glasses rip.
Yeah, and I think most clubs would look at it and think, okay, if this happens once, that's okay. It's not excusable, but it's understandable. Everyone suffers with their emotions. There's a lot going on. Maybe he's upset about the nuclear war. There's kind of a lot for Matheus Cunha to think about.
When did you get sent off? When did you get mad? It's just the pressure of the geopolitics weighing down on my shoulders.
Can't deal with it. Why wasn't he wearing a suit? I think there's a lot to. I think clubs will overlook one transgression. They'll say, okay, he's clearly a fiery character. It needs managing. It's something we have to be aware of. But if we put him in the right environment, surround him with the right people, then maybe we can deal with it. I think if it happens twice in the way that it has, a lot of clubs will look at it and think this guy's not worth the trouble. And that's a shame, because Matheus Cunha is clearly a brilliant footballer. He's an extremely exciting footballer to watch. And there's not that many players who kind of fall into that category anymore, of the kind of edge of your seat players, the ones who you will pay to watch alone. But I think with that streak in him, and it's become so pronounced now twice in not even 3 or 4 months, it's a really short period of time, I think that might hold Matheus Cunha back, which ironically will probably increase his level of frustration.
I love, more dry wood on the Cunha fire. I gotta say, that's the game of EA Sports FIFA I would love to play, where if the players had rankings for genius and insanity. Cunha, he's 100 for insanity, not quite where he wants to be on the genius, says Yuri Smith. But that red mist. Or goal missed. By the way, that reminds me of one of my favourite descriptions of Wayne Rooney when he came through as a young player. So, one of the journalists, I think in The Guardian, wrote that he was a snarling ball of aggression, impossible to be denied, which is just humanly poetic. Keep working at it, Cunha, I would say, on both sides, because that red mist or that goal miss could be costly. I think he'll get more than just a 3-game ban. As you say, a second-time offender, some key games, some very winnable games that could have taken Wolves way, way away from the relegation zone will now be a little more risky, starting at Everton this weekend. But to penalties, and Sam Johnson had been the hero in goal for Wolves, and he seemed to have the upper hand. Kepa, quite a patchy, famous reputation in penalty shootouts. Wolves actually had a moment to win after Johnstone read poor young Dean Howson's 4th Cherry penalty, which gave the temporary Wolves captain Doherty the chance to step up to the spot to clinch. Gent is a proven goal scorer. I think he's scored some classic own goals in the past, and here he showed his tragic magic, slapped the ball really a mile wide of the post with the quarterfinals within his grasp, racked with nerves. Traoré then smashed the crossbar, up stepped Cherry's king, Luis Sinisterra. And good God, Cherries in the quarterfinal for the 3rd time in their history. 1957 and 2021, let the record show. Raw, this was victory, grasped from the jaws as defeat. First of all, if Bournemouth do go to Wembley, I want to go on the record and say, I'm going to go to the barbers and get the bald man version of a Kirkes.
I'm not sure there is a bald man version of a Kirkes.
I'm wearing it right now, I think. By the way, I believe it's the only haircut in football history that David Beckham did not invent, the Kirkes.
It's he's made a play for some IP of his own there, hasn't he?
Yeah,
really?
That's what football's about. Cole Palmer's already trademarked the Kirkes, apparently, Raw.
It's unfortunate in one way that they've got Man City in the quarter-final draw. That's not ideal for Bournemouth. But it is great for the competition, because I think Bournemouth are the team that are most likely to beat Manchester City. That is, at the Vitality, they've beaten there already this season. Little bit of a psychological edge over City, I think, Bournemouth. Clearly having a wonderful season, one of the stories of the campaign in England. And it would be really hard, it would be really difficult to begrudge Andoni Iraola ending this season with a trophy. If they get past City, they're probably the best team left in it.
And that's what your point is. What the Cup needs right now, the FA Cup, is a medium-sized club to end that kind of like stranglehold that the big teams have had on the big ear trophy.
I think the problem that the FA Cup's had for quite a while is that it tends to be won by teams for whom it is either a consolation prize, like Manchester United last season, or it's a kind of addendum to the other thing they've been trying to do. So they've won the league and they win the FA Cup. They've won the Champions League and they win the FA Cup. The FA Cup's at its best when it's the purpose of the season for someone, ideally for both of the finalists. And increasingly this year, it looks like it might end up being the purpose of the season for potentially kind of 6 of the quarter-finalists. Man City need to win it to rescue their campaign. Bournemouth, Palace, Villa, Nottingham Forest and Ipswich are playing tonight after we record. And, Forest, if they get into the Champions League, that is incredible. Nottingham Forest haven't won anything since the 1980s. They could really do with a trophy. Football is about winning trophies. It's about moments. And what the FA Cup can do, I think, in an era where it's not the most important competition, it's not the thing that everybody dreams of winning, is you provide the teams that don't normally get those moments with the chance to have that moment. So yeah, if you ended up with a Bournemouth Villa final or a Forest Villa final or basically anybody apart from Manchester City, effectively, in the final, what you would end up with is a cup final that is, for those two teams, the biggest game of their season, and that's kind of what the cup final's meant to be.
You made it sound like the Europa Conference League.
Little bit.
Raw in every regard. Can we just shout out Dango Utara's penalty? He just put the ball down, stood over it. Goalkeeper was expecting him to walk back, start a run up, and he just calmly, quickly rolled it home while the keeper was standing, totally not ready. It was psychologically so delicious. And shout out to Jack Temple, GFOP, who wrote, Rog, I'm sitting here at home in San Diego yelling at my television over an FA Cup 5th round tie between Bournemouth and Wolves. It's so bizarre, but it's also so right, and it's all because of your team at Men in Blazers. Thank you for this joy. Godspeed, Jack. I just say to Cherry, glory. Newcastle 1, Brighton 2 after extra time. Pulsating clash between two teams with European dreams in their own right. Brighton suddenly surging under freshly turned, he's only 32, baby manager Fabian Hürzeler. Newcastle have already reached Wembley in the Carabao Cup. I was quite surprised. Both managers sent out strong lineups. They went all in on this FA Cup, even if it sacrifices a percentile of performance in the 11-game sprint to Europe that their Premier League closing gauntlet remains. Case in point, Alexander Isak, touch and go to play, and they made Rue playing him. He missed the Liverpool tilt due to the groin knack, but the game went as he went in the early exchanges. Both teams up for it. Brighton dominated possession. Newcastle poised on the counter. Commentators kept marvelling at how Brighton's wingers Mitoma and Minter kept tracking back. That's called foreshadowing, because suddenly Minter went to Livramento with what they used to call a forwards tackle. Isak finished the penalty with aplomb. 22nd goal of the season for him. 17 goals in his 17 starts since December. Those are Mo Salah numbers. Letter for you, Raw, from GFOP John Heltzer, who wrote, Rog and Rory, SofaScore estimates Isak's transfer value is about $80.6 million right now, with a listed body mass of £170. That works out to be about $1,043 per gram of slick scoring Swede, which is only marginally more expensive than printer ink.
Yeah, I mean, that surprises me that anything's more expensive than printer ink, even in an era where we seem not to use printers very often at all. I don't think that is an accurate...
Last time was amazing, Rob. Just let it drift, even in an era in which we don't really use printers.
Yeah, we don't really need printers anymore, do we?
Very soon we'll be trading Isak for just 6 eggs, Rob.
That's true. I don't know if you've seen the price of the M&S meal deal recently, Rog, but it's soaring.
We'll swap you, Isak, say Arsenal, for 3 M&S meal deals, and Newcastle will bite your arm off.
I find it astonishing that Sofa Stores, which is not a website with which I'm overly familiar, but I know what it is, that they think that Alexander Isak's value is $80 million. Alexander Isak's value is at least twice that.
God bless. Get on it, SofaScore. SofaScore sounds like actually a website for people with sofa fetishes. I will say no more. By the way, Isak also scored one of the best offside goals that we scored this season. Went off later with groin knack, ... which I'm sure Newcastle fans are holding their breath over. But after he scored, Newcastle kind of reacted by becoming strangely dormant. Which took their own crowd out the game. Brighton asserted themselves. I love watching Brighton. Watching them play, it's like watching someone try and do a Rubik's Cube while doing parkour at the same time. And they got their reward. And redemption for Minter, who'd been at Newcastle, get this, for 1 season. Never played a single minute for the two. They loaned him out, I think, to Feyenoord. And he ran in behind, finished beautifully, opened up his body, rolled it under the keeper. But out of respect for the club that loaned him out for an entire season, he didn't do a celebration. Is that too much? It's a leading question. But is that too much respect,
I think, if anything, it is a little bit too much respect, Rog. Although maybe he's trying to express his admiration for Newcastle's signing policy. Maybe they had a really good loans manager.
Yeah, they're good loans.
It's hard to say.
The loan policy.
I love the loan. The guy who kept calling me every week to find out how I was doing. He was really nice. I'm not celebrating it.
Out of respect for the parking spot that I was given when assigned. God bless. I'd love to honestly know what was going through his mind in that moment. But the second half, honestly, a lot of noise signifying nothing. A lot of Brighton huffing. Hinchelwood, God bless that man, drove them on. Toon held on. so many free kicks given. There was the number of times a player that had given away a free kick tapped the ball away. I lost count, and I did feel for Arsenal fans watching that, which is a leading question, Rox. I need to ask you quickly on the subplot of time wasting. IFAB, the International Football Association Board, announced this weekend that goalkeepers will have 8 seconds to claim and redistribute the ball before they're penalised. Get this, the referee will give a 5-second countdown. God, I can't imagine this happening. To warn them of incoming punishment. If they take longer than 5 seconds, then the opposing team will immediately be given a corner. Raw, this sounds newfangled. I don't quite know what I make of it. When I think about all the problems in the game, this is probably not in my top 10 list, but what do you make of it?
Well, it sounds very similar to something I have to do with my daughter at the moment. She's decided she's not really up for food that's not white bread. So we're trying to vary her diet. And we have to sort of say to her, after a while, you lose your patience. You've been through this. You lose your patience a little bit. And you're like, right, you've got to eat that. I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4, 3. And she just sits there just looking at you completely defiantly. And I can kind of see Martin Dubravka being given the same treatment by Anthony Taylor. Just, Martin, you've got to release the ball. 5, 4, 3.5, 3 1/4, 3. Come on, Martin. Come on. You know you want to. I'll give you some sweets. 2.
Eat the white bread, Martin.
Do you want some toast? I don't know. As you say, it's not a massive problem. Again, it's the reason that everyone is clamping down on time wasting is because football is a television product. Dead airtime is not good for anybody. Holding on to the ball as a goalkeeper is therefore an act of anti-capitalist rebellion, so we are pro it. But to be honest, I think there is a point where it's okay to fiddle around with the enforcement of the rules to try and encourage action. We are meant to be watching action. It's very expensive watching football, whether you're in the stadium or watching on television. It's a shame when you lose quite a lot of that to people deliberately dawdling.
God bless. But I heard this. I was just like, another rule that will be enforced against Arsenal and Arsenal only. Godspeed. Back to the game, which came to life when Anthony Gordon put both hands needlessly through, I think it was Van Hecker's head. A loss for Newcastle. Another win for Liverpool. They'll be without old Lady Diana Ginger Hair in the Carabao Cup final unless they can appeal it successfully. But in the same passage of play, he's out limped off. Groening gone. Toon suddenly there for the taking. Tiny Lamptey got his second yellow for Brighton. Shaw thundered out what he thought was a late winner. The whole stadium thought it was a late winner, but semi-automatic VAR correctly found him to be about 15 yards offside. Extra time was really just about a toiling fight against energy debt. But in the very last 140 minutes, on the break, that boy Hinchelwood fed well back. And he executed really an incredible body shape, just a contortion of his body to strain and unleash a tenderly lethal chip over Dubravka as the ball was going away from him. 34 years old, Raw, Danny Welbeck. Arguably what Arsenal thought Raheem Sterling could be for them, joined Brighton on a free transfer in 2020. Seemed to be in the twilight of his career when he arrived, but 150 appearances later, again 34 years old, 46 goal contributions and counting, and still delivering transcendent moments in the death of games, which for a fan base who live and love this team, they know they're watching a living, breathing club legend stride around before their eyes, and it's magnificent to witness. Yeah,
it's a really heartwarming story, Danny Welbeck, because he was deemed kind of not good enough for Manchester United, which is a sentiment that maybe people would dispute when he left, and they definitely dispute it now.
Compliment now, baby.
And then obviously he was at Arsenal, and he never settled at Arsenal. Injuries have always been a bit of a problem for Danny Welbeck through his career, but no one ever really doubted his quality. It was just that no one seemed to be able to find a way to build a team around him. And I think when he left for Brighton, people felt, well, look, he'll be a good character to have around for Brighton, but he's not a kind of elite striker. Now, when you watch him play, he looks a cut above basically everybody else around. He is 34, but doesn't really play like a 34-year-old, doesn't play like he's an older player. Still lots of energy, lots of strength, huge amounts of quality and an ability to finish and to produce artful finishes. There's an evergreen quality to him, and because of the fact that he has been judged not quite right for 2 of the biggest clubs in the country, to see him thrive is genuinely really kind of stirring.
2 years older than his manager, Herzler. Herzler, Houston-born. To European parents who were temporarily working in Texas, become the first American-born coach to make this deeper stage of the FA Cup in our nation's history. Hashtag Bob Bradley could never. Brighton have a 5th win. Place in the quarter-final. They play the Forest or Ipswich, who play tonight. God bless, as you said, they, Palace, Bournemouth, have never won the trophy, and it is all magnificent to witness. Crystal Palace 3, Millwall 1. Let's talk about this quickly. Clash of South London, say minor houses with histories rooted in the old days of English football. Palace we know well, we love them, remade themselves as South London's most globally local brand. Millwall, we were told, are in the process of remaking themselves under American ownership. John Berylson, the late great financier who passed away in a car crash tragedy in 2024, now overseen by his son, who have a vision of dragging Millwall, this team, a singular team. They conjure and embody something almost a throwback to an older day of football, the fan base embrace, almost the cold hard hooligan brand of football's hyper-local, hyper-violent days. And God bless. They used to emphasise less the football, more the winning, the rumbles before and after, sometimes during matches. Their chant, no one likes us and we don't care. What's incredible about them is that glory or even success has been a blip in their history. I think they've been in the top flight for just 2 seasons in their 140-year existence. But Raw, the Millwall name, it does conjure the notion of a cold, hard punch in the teeth and a kick in the exposed down belows. We're desperately told, no, they're changing. They're a changed entity. But when you think Millwall, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm of a certain generation, so I think what everybody thinks when they think of Millwall. Everyone of my age, the image that you've described, you can probably make the case that Millwall are the most famous club, certainly in England, possibly in the world, compared to their kind of honours list. And I don't say that with any great sneering at Millwall. Millwall are not a kind of noteworthy football team in any real way. Then certainly not as noteworthy historically as, say, Oldham or Notts County. But they are far more famous. They have a much more kind of higher... They have a much greater kind of public image because of the dark side of Millwall. And I think they have struggled they have struggled over the years to remove that. They are, as you say, they are still a kind of hyper-local team, even in a globalised age. Their stadium, the Den, is in Bermondsey, which is a part of London, southeast London, that has rapidly gentrified, except around the stadium. The fans are the same people who have been going for years and years and years, and that is precious, and that's something to be cherished. But at the same time, within that, there is a hardcore who are not necessarily there for the football, for whom the football is an adjunct or a gateway to something much darker. But the thing that I would say about Millwall is there is another side to Millwall, and it's not one that appears in the public perception, and that is that they are in the middle of one of the most diverse areas of London. They do incredibly good work in the community to reach out to local black kids, to local kids of Asian descent, of all the various sort of ethnicities and minorities that live in that part of London and in all parts of London. A lot of Millwall's community outreach work is among the best in the country. So for all that we tend to think of the image of Millwall as sort of propagated by a small section of their fans, there is another side to Millwall, one that deserves to be praised much more.
Yeah, there were a number of really beautifully written think pieces about how Millwall's violent reputation before the game is a cliche, that there's more subtle things going on, more new, as you talk about important things, and that the violence is a thing of the past. Somewhat undone pre-game by one fan going on a solo mission to try and fight 10 Crystal Palace supporters single-handedly, or single-punchedly. Then once the game kicked off, took just 5 minutes for honestly one of the most shocking acts of on-field violence I've seen this season to go down. Millwall goalkeeper Liam Roberts met Jean-Philippe Mateta in a one-on-one, flew out of his goal, no doubt propelled by a cocktail of adrenaline and just in a vision which will be now heralded as pure Millwall heritage, recklessly flew in. I can only describe it as like some kind of South London Bruce Lee. He took Mateta out with a terrible force, kicking him in the head in the process. He's 6'4" Mateta. To get your feet that high, Raw, you've really got to will it.
Yeah, it's hard to think of of a circumstance or like an explanation for that tackle, for that challenge. I just don't understand how it could reasonably be excused. And it's in a way it's quite sad, because that is a massive game for Millwall's goalkeeper, and it's a chance, to play on. It was on TV in this country. You're being beamed around the world in a way that most Millwall games aren't. And 8 minutes in, it's over. But obviously, you feel far worse for Mateta, who went straight to hospital after, an incident that really doesn't belong anywhere near a football pitch.
God bless it. If deep, long-time World Cup fans may remember the 1982 West Germany, France game, 1982 moment where German heel goalkeeper Harald Schumacher took out Patrick Battiston on a one-on-one with a similar flying kick, which he later actually admitted was intentional. Game went on with the striker laying on the field, and then a 9-minute stoppage. The Millwall fans, or an element of them, chose to sing "Let him die, let him die" during that stoppage. It is a cliche about Millwall fans, but my God, to see it lived out in the spotlight in that minute was really really awful. And Mateta, thank God, has been discharged from hospital with 25 stitches in his left ear. Crystal Palace chairman Steve Parish described it, quote, as the most reckless challenge I've ever seen. The game itself that followed, not that intriguing. Millwall went down 2-0. Poor Japhet Tanganga, own goal, huge mistake to gift a second, living proof you can take the boy out of Spurs, ... Millwall fought back admirably, actually, with 10 men. Got one back, but then Chris Richards, the pride of Alabama, delivered a delicious header for Eddie Nketiah to kill the game off and allow a relieved Palace Ultra Group to unfurl a banner that they must have been keeping down their pants for 80 whatever minutes, saying South London is ours, always was, always will be. Raw. How relieved do you imagine they would have been to finally be able to get out? Or did you ever think, if they'd lost and had to walk home with that banner, never seen, how sad that would feel?
I suppose there's an element of that about all ultra banners, isn't there? There must be certain ones that have been made and just never see the light of day because the circumstances don't arise. It must be... Think of all the songs that have gone unsung because teams have lost their match.
Those tifos probably end up in some Indian village, Super Bowl winning T-shirts made for the losing team. But it reminds me of Ian Wright telling that story about how when he broke the goal scoring record, he wore a T-shirt under his jersey that said something like "Just done it." But then he'd had to he'd worn it for 4 or 5 games in which he hadn't scored. And I always just thought about what that must have felt like post-game to have to take it off, sadly, look at it, wash it, put it back on again.
Well, I personally, as a superstitious man, would never have worn it, because I would have assumed that wearing it, certainly after a couple of times, wearing it would have made me assume that I was never going to score again because of the hubris. Yeah,
it's a rational reality, Raw, but one of you got 179 goals and one of you didn't, so I don't know what to say. Yes, ... Are you wearing a T-shirt underneath your podcasting outfit and you're waiting? 179 more goals, Rog, and this T-shirt will be seen.
Suddenly, I've had it on since I was 17. Should probably change it.
Preston 3, Burnley 0. The all-Lancashire clash between two mill towns. Founder members of English football. We know Burnley well, the town that JJ Watt built. Raw, explain Preston to our audience. Well, the town, what is its place in the English tapestry outside of Charles Dickens' novel Hard Times, been inspired by his time in Preston?
Yeah, Preston's not massively different to Burnley, really. It does have a brutalist bus station that I think needs to be mentioned, and it really, truly remarkable building, and also quite remarkably ugly. And the one thing that Preston has, maybe even over Burnley, is football. First English champions, 1888. The last team before Arsenal to be invincible, the same one. Preston was the home of the Football Museum for a long time before they moved it to Manchester. Tom Finney, born and raised in Preston, played for Preston. They've won trophies. Preston were kind of English football's first giants. And I think there's still an element of that gives a bit of pride to the town.
I know Preston because it opened the first ever Kentucky Fried Chicken in the United Kingdom.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, but there's a guy called Ray Allen, not the basketball player, who randomly met Colonel Sanders, who I didn't even know was a real person, in the 1960s and got the license for the business, which is just listeners, random connections change lives. By the way, there was a horrible side story to this game. Both teams were in the Championship. They played earlier, I think in February, and there was an awful racist stain that hung over this game. Burnley midfielder Hannibal had accused the Montenegrin Milutin Osmadjic of racially abusing him during the last game. Osmadjic, he's the kind of player, he was handed an 8-match suspension earlier this year for biting a Blackburn Rovers left-back during the game. And so the Burnley players all refused to shake his hand ahead of the game. Burnley, to be fair, rested almost all of their first team, including Hannibal, focusing on the promotion charge. Preston won 3-0. Osmadjic scored the second goal and ran towards the Burnley fans in the away end, cupping his ear, which is a move, Raw. I don't know what it means. Is he saying, can you hear my racism now?
I feel a lot of the kind of iconography of celebrations has gone a bit awry, Rog, if I'm honest. My son scored a goal a few weeks ago.
Yep.
And celebrated
Did he rock the baby?
He shushed. And I said to him afterwards, who are you shushing? And he went, what do you mean? He's just seen it on FIFA. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, look, if you do that, it means you're shutting up your critics, but you don't have any critics because you're 7. And he went, oh. And he's not done it since. So I think Osmadjic, I don't know, is he saying, I can't hear you accusing me correctly of racism? Is that what he's saying?
Yep.
It's a very odd... People need to think their celebrations through more.
I know, I would have loved Osmadjic to do the rocking the baby. I'm going to have a racist baby. Would have been amazing. I'm going to have many racist babies. By the way, I'm going to tell your son, I'm going to get him to rock the baby and give you real panic when he next scores. Grandpa
deeply
Rory,
disturbing. Yeah.
Incoming. Preston in the quarterfinals for the first time since 1966, welcoming Aston Villa in the next round. Burnley do have much bigger fish to fry, as Scotty Parker said post-game. The promotion race is there. Everything. By the way, one thing I did like about this game, that old Reddit thread of old, it reminded me of Carabao clashes that sound like American male names. Leicester Bolton and Charlton Bradford, I think, were the examples there. This game, Preston Burnley, did sound like the most American name ever to play 5th round FA Cup football, Rook.
Except that the most American name ever to play FA Cup quarter-final football might well be Preston Villa.
That's so true. God bless Preston. May you ever, mate. When you realise what Preston the town is, and you think about the American guys, hey Preston, just the ultimate frat boy. I think Preston Villa is definitely that kid in the South fraternity whose dad did that terrible thing to his girlfriend. It is time to talk about Friday night's game. Aston Villa crushes Cardiff City 2-0. Fast becoming a one-man team. Marco Asensio scored another 2 goals. Marcus Rashford didn't convert a couple of chances, but he did get another Marcus assist. Eminem forever, baby. By the way, Marcus Rashford, no one has created more than the 13 chances he has since he joined the Villa. Green shoot to redemption, the sweetest thing. Raw, I love that Asensio's dad named him Marco, reportedly after the legendary Netherlands striker Marco van Basten. Proof names matter, Rory. Do not call your child Rasmus is clearly where your mind goes to.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect a kind of boom of Rasmuses anytime soon. Interestingly, so Marco Asensio named after Marco van Basten, Dennis Bergkamp named after Dennis Law. So there's a kind of Dutch thing here going on, both giving and taking names from football, which suggests the Dutch need a broader cultural impact.
It is biblical, almost, man. I am trying to persuade Mrs. Bennett to have a 5th child with me so I can call it Beto Bennett. That child will be the one.
Is that who Beto O'Rourke's named after?
Yeah. Did you not know that?
It must be right. That must be, yeah.
By the way, these things are not coincidences. Beto O'Rourke will be playing for Everton in about 15 years' time, just so we can tell that story. Villa re-enter the Champions League this week at Club Brugge. Godspeed to them. You mentioned Everton? No, I did. But the team have been revelling in their warm weather training under St. David Moyes. Thanks to your response to my interview with David up on our YouTube. It is beautiful, even though I'm in it. A couple of people said you're a bit giddy. You're still 5th from bottom of the table. I'll just say, to understand David Moyes' impact, you've got to have lived through the pain of the last 10 years of being an Everton fan. Right now, we are 15 points clear of the relegation zone. It was only 7 weeks ago that gap was 2 points. That is the joy, the wonder. In a week in which our director of football, Kevin Thelwell, it was announced he's going to be leaving the club. I just want to thank him. He made so much out of so little, lived off scraps. Clearly not the man to take us into the next world, the next era, this blank canvas on which to paint wonder with our new stadium. But Godspeed to him. And I just say we've got a very special show debuting on Peacock next Sunday, which features a film that we made when I went back to Goodison Park for the last time, for the Merseyside derby, emerging after that James Tarkowski-inspired 2-2 win with a smash pair of glasses. All I say right now is it's the most personal film I think we've ever made. I can't wait for you to see it. It debuts next Sunday on Peacock after Manchester United Arsenal. Raw, will you be able to watch it, or as a red? Does that feel too soon?
I think I'll be able to put myself through it. You know, these things, it's water under the bridge, Rog.
You pat me on the head patronisingly as you say that. So let's finish. I walked into that one with a letter from GFOP Ryan Hammond, who wrote to us at meninblazers@gmail.com, like so many of you. Ryan, I think you're from Montana. Shout out to all of you in Big Sky Country. Email us your postal. We'll send you a patch. But Raw, I love this letter. Do the honours.
It starts, "Hello, Rog and Rory. My friends, my 12-year-old daughter and I are taking a trip to the UK this March/April. She's a midfielder on her local club team, Declan Rice Vibes, and we plan on catching as much footy and Reds as we can while we're there. This is an excellent plan. So far, we're only committed to Arsenal against Fulham on April the 1st and Hearts versus Dundee on April the 5th, which has filled me with admiration. Tynecastle is an amazing stadium. Great choice. We spend the week after that making our way back down slowly from Scotland to London for our flight back home, and it looks like we have the following options for stops along the way: Middlesbrough, Norwich, Oxford, Derby and Coventry. Do any of those sound like particularly good ones for us to catch? Courage."
Ryan from Montana, that is the greatest road trip ever. Raw, those are the towns. Let me read them again. Is it Middlesbrough, Norwich, Oxford, Derby, Coventry? You got some spread there. If you had to pick two, what would you recommend them one?
Well, picking two as towns, you'd have to go for Norwich and Oxford. Picking two as football stadiums, Middlesbrough has very strong kind of late 90s Fabrizio Ravanelli vibes. Oxford is out of town. I wouldn't recommend Oxford for a football kind of trip. Derby, Identity Stadium, not that interesting. Coventry, interesting seeing the Frank Lampard revolution. What I think of as being the Ricoh, it's not called the Ricoh anymore, is not a historic stadium. But they might be in quite a good mood at the moment. And I think Norwich's stadium, Carrow Road, really good English stadium. If you like Tynecastle, you will like Carrow Road. There's a great shopping complex nearby. Parking's very easy. The town is lovely. I'm going to say Norwich and Coventry, and apologise to the inhabitants of Middlesbrough, Oxford and Derby.
Can I say Coventry? You're right. The Frank Laugh, forgot to shout him out, what he's doing at Coventry, the redemption, the joy, the wonder. It is incredible to see him thrive and soar again. But Ryan, you can't lose would be my response. It is the greatest road trip ever that you're about to be on with your daughter. And her age, 12 in life. There's a sociological statistic that my wife taught me. Girls' confidence peaks around 9 and 10. And then steadily declines throughout that teen era, and once it goes, it never comes back. This complex world of social media and life, and boys conspires almost to kick the crap out of girls' confidence culturally and societally. So I'd just say you can't lose it. It's the greatest parenting opportunity to keep your daughter's confidence with your love, the memories you make. May it soar. You're an incredible dad. May this trip be a foundational memory for you and your daughter. For me, Oxford and Norwich are both extraordinary in their own way, just singular, historic, different. You'll burn your way into your memories together, but just love it, the football. May that be the jewel of the memory making on this trip. I've said this before, but I do love it about Norwich. My favourite quote comes from the great writer Kazuo Ishiguro, who actually lived in Norwich while doing a creative writing set of studies. He said the area around Norwich, that's Norfolk, he said called it England's lost corner because it's where all the lost property found in England ends up. An image which I just love. Actually, reminds me of Josh Sargent, lost property, just turning up and thriving and soaring. I loved your letter. Enjoy the games, Ryan. Send us your postal. We'll send you a patch. Keep sending your letters and questions for Rory and me to meninblazers@gmail.com. That's it for today. Keep your eyes out for Rory and me on European nights tomorrow. That farewell Goodison Park interview drops Friday. You can find our full schedule across our social. Raw, huge love to you, you Crown Prince of Harrogate.
I'm a bit worried I've upset people in Middlesbrough.
This is Rog, sending you big love. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted. Encourage.